And I should have said this about 10 episodes ago. Heidi, hey Jeff. All right. So this is the
I think I said it last week.
yeah. Well, you beat me to the punch again. Yeah. Um. So I'm gonna try and. Oh, I've not read this before, so I might make a mistake because usually it gets quite.
Well, that's okay because the writer makes mistakes too. So
Yeah, that's the thing is I make mistakes because of the writer as well, and sometimes I've like long, complicated sentences. So let's see how I go. I do remember your advice of reading it slower. Uh, Lucy arrives in Zeta's cafe, not knowing where she is and how she got there. Simon quickly comes forward and tells everybody that Lucy is his grandmother and that she looks so young because she has undergone a rejuvenation procedure common in Kappatoo's time. This is sent her a bit crazy. And that's what I meant, Jeff, about that thing last week about setting something up in that episode when Simon cracked onto Kappatoo's mother when this like attractive young woman came in looking about 20. And so that was to set this up, the rejuve stuff. Lucy, unable to take it in, faints and is helped by the time travel police. Well, they call them the time police, who, after making sure she is okay, gives Zeta a ticking off for twice now bringing unfounded allegations against Kappatoo. As Simon is about to beam back to Kappatoo's dome with his sister, Zeta invites them both to a grandmother's party that evening, which Simon reluctantly agrees to let Lucy attend. Sigmasix contacts Zeta via his wristband and she angrily demands her computer return to her dome and then advises Sigmasix of his next move. Simon and the computer then set about the task of teaching her several decades of history, or in her case, future, so she won't stick out at the party. At the party, Lucy is a big hit with the other grannies, and apart from Lucy mentioning a few 20th century celebrities, the evening goes off without any incident. Once Zeta's computer has returned to her dome, she advises it that the real problem for them is Kappatoo's computer. No, she doesn't advise it. He advises her that the real problem is Kappatoo's computer. It was Psycho that brought that up. He advises her that the real problem for them is Kappatoo's computer, and her computer sets about building a circuit to disable it. Once built, it beams over to Kappatoo's dome and gives the corrupted circuit to his computer. When Simon and Lucy have both beamed back to Kappatoo's dome, Simon sees on the histogram his mum speaking to Kappatoo, demanding to speak to Lucy. He advises the computer Lucy needs to go home. After Lucy is transported to the future, Sigmasix and Zeta's computer beam away, and Sharon comes into the barn looking for Lucy. Kappatoo and Steve tell her a bizarre story about her running off with a biker she has been seeing for the past 2 years. Sharon agrees to play along if the two of them buy her an inexpensive pair of trainers, and I'll assume Jeff knows what they are. Kappatoo adapts the TV so he can contact Simon, while Steve moans about how they're going to get money for Sharon's new trainers. Melanie interrupts them and asks them to come bowling with her, but Kappatoo advises her that they are too busy. Kappatoo manages to get through to his dome and his computer advises him that Lucy has to stay there until after the party. Kappatoo works out a plan so that Lucy won't be missed by claiming that she has gone bowling with him and Melanie. Steve, annoyed, states he is coming as well, and Sharon joins them. At the bowling alley, Melanie asks where Lucy is, and Kappatoo makes the excuse that she is getting some food, has no luck on his go, and then uses his wristband to make the bowling machine lift the pins when Steve is bowling. When they all get home, Hazel asks where Lucy is, and Kappatoo advises that a friend is going to drop her off. Hazel is unconvinced, but before she can say any more, the phone rings, and it is Simon and Lucy's mum, which is making her first appearance in the series, too. After Kappatoo speaks to Simon's mum, Lucy appears, having beamed back from the future. Brian demands an explanation from Lucy, but before she can speak, there's an explosion outside. They all rush out to see several different coloured energy fields, which Brian believes are poltergeists. Kappatoo freezes them all in time and gets rid of them using his wristband. At that moment, Sigmasix appears and tells Kappatoo this was just a test, before beaming away. Once unfrozen, they make their way back into the house. Brian's still convinced that it's the supernatural, but Kappatoo sees Sigmasix watching them. Wow, that took nearly 6 minutes to get through. Over to you, Jeff. I'm going to have a rest.
Well, to be fair to them, the episode was kind of convoluted. But what was it you said that you were going to assume I knew what was?
Trainers.
Oh, I think I figured that what that was figured out what that was. I'll learn to speak one of these days. Just by the inference. You know, I was thinking, is it you mean like cross-training shoes? Is that where it comes from?
Yeah, pretty much training shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I sort of guessed what they were talking about there. At first, I wasn't sure because at least one of the times one of them said it sounded like they said trainee rather than trainer. So I was confused. But I'm also not sure what he meant by that was a test. A test of what?
Yeah.
Are we supposed to know that yet? Or
yeah, I think that was a little bit of maybe lazy writing to get some sort of ending out of it.
Yeah, because this was the most awkward cliffhanger I think they've had so far because it wasn't really one. It was just sort of like, oh, here's the guy that just disappeared, but he's back again somehow.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Sometimes we get that in Doctor Who, don't we? In like a part 3.
Yes. I was just about to say it reminded me of oh gosh, I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. What was the Third Doctor story with the villains that sort of look like Klingons? It was the one where the Master was trying to like pit the two races against each other, but I think the Master was using the
Draconians with the Draconians.
Yes, Draconians, and then anyway, there was one episode of that story where there was several opportunities of things that could have been the cliffhanger of the episode, and instead, the end of the episode is the back of a dude driving a spaceship. It's like, what? That was the best you could do?
Yeah, timing requirements. Although they did move them around a lot in those days. Like, the length of episodes would vary quite a bit within about 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, at least in that case, they had a whatever deadline that the BBC put on them as far as the time of it. The worst, I think, that I encountered in Doctor Who was actually in the audio stories, when the time already the length of the episodes of those things is all over the place, and there's no one dictating, oh, it has to be this length so that you got the next program, because it's an independent thing with Big Finish. And they had a story where, again, the same thing happened, where it was like they had multiple opportunities for an actual good cliffhanger, and then they ended on some weird thing. It was like, what? Anyway.
Yeah, so today, folks, Jeff is being the NP and I'm being the SP, in that Jeff is tangenting off onto another.
Well, yeah, and then once again, continues my theory that the more tired I am, the more like that I am, because I'm quite tired out today. But,
well, I have a way to help you out. I wrote down 3 or 4 things which I think you were amused by. Now, the first one.
Well, before you say that, I just want to finish saying the things I actually thought of, because if I don't, I'll forget them. Okay. In fact, I may already have. I mean, I was going to say overall, I liked the episode because I think Lucy's my favorite character, and she was sort of featured in this one more.
Yeah.
So, uh, I did. The other thing I was going to mention was, were any of the other grandmothers, younger, or were they all supposed to be like Lucy was the only one that did the rejuvenation thing? Because it seemed like that it would have.
Yeah, a lot of them seem to be older. I think that
You would think at least one or two other ones should have been to sort of continue the idea that it's a common thing rather than something that's an anomaly. But
I'll just say it's almost like that thing, in a debate where they say, "Oh, I need to respond to that because they said something to me." It's like it's that bit where I like the little touch from the writers where they had one of the older women say that she's heard that there can be side effects and that it can do your mind.
Yeah, and so I could understand why they wouldn't all be that way, but I would have figured that it would have been more than just her. So, and then they showed, like, when they had the wide shot of the dancing, I thought I maybe saw maybe one other girl that could have been supposed to be, but I couldn't really tell. So I don't know. It seemed like they could have made that a little more clear, but they also haven't really addressed the issue of, at least I don't remember, of like, is Kappatoo like from a wealthy family or something? Does he have a lot more money than a lot of people, or his family does? Because maybe it could be one of those things where it's like it just costs too much for the typical person to have it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. And I think if it had a bigger budget, I would have wanted to expand it like that. I would have sort of gone into those kind of things.
I mean, you could have had a few throwaway lines of stuff instead of having so many scenes.
Because
where we're trying to hem and haw about where Lucy is and stuff.
So, what do you think of? So this gets into a little bit about the phrase "the character iceberg," and what do you think of the idea of like things being mentioned that are not in the story but gives you an idea of a sort of a larger world? Do you like that, or do you feel a little bit cut off from that? Where it's mentioning things that you don't know.
I like it if it's natural to the story. If it doesn't seem like it's just forced info dump or something.
So, for instance, like in Star Wars Episode 4, he's mentioning things that are outside the immediate story that are then, so it's like you can see that George Lucas did the work and that there's things outside of the present story. Like when he mentions stuff in the meeting about the Imperial Senate and stuff like that being dissolved, you can see there's stuff going on off camera, that sort of sense of a larger world, a larger context. Anyhow.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't think it took away from anything to do that. Like I said, as long as it seems to.
I think the issue with doing that with Lucy's is they wanted it to be the attention on her, and if they'd have made it more common and there'd been other ones there, it would have like altered the focus and their reactions to her, and they might have said, well, these other ones are not like that, or so even though logically you're right, maybe they could have put a line in about an expensive treatment, not that many people can afford it, as you said.
Yeah, it also made me wonder where Kappatoo's parents were. Did they not hear about this? Would they have been informed of such things, or would she, the villain woman, have made some sort of effort to contact the parents to try to bust them in some way? I don't know, just those kind of things.
So, Jeff, what kind of smile is that? Is it a sarcastic smile? What kind of smile is she doing? It's a kind of a cheeky smile there. I don't know what name we have for that. Where it's sort of like, it's a smile where you're sort of rubbing it into somebody. Because she did that before. So yeah, like I said, it's sort of a cheeky artisan, right?
Yeah, well, there's a term for it that I won't use since it's a family show. But
okay, right, okay, right. So the bits that I thought you were amused by. Now the first one I'm not quite sure, but I like the moment when there was a bit where I got to give it to Simon Nash, who plays Simon and Kappatoo, that I do think he's quite good at comedy. And I like the bit where he comes up to her and he says, "Give your tongue a rest," and then she does this and says, "Don't be cheeky to your grandma, Kappa." And you may have been amused by that. I wasn't quite sure that bit, but were you amused by that?
I didn't understand the word she said, but
No, she says, "Don't be cheeky to your grandmother, Kappa."
yeah, I just said I didn't understand the word she said, but I
All
like
right.
the fact that she was adaptable to the whole thing in terms of she got into her character.
Yeah. And then I saw you amused with the bad bowling. And then when she made mistakes towards the end. I think the biggest laugh from you, or arguably only, there was the bit where she makes the mistakes, and then she says, "George Formby, George Michael, George Bush," and you laughed at the George Bush line.
Yeah, well, that's quite a variety of people there. So
Yeah. Well, maybe the Funbury's got to her. We don't even know what kind of beverage the Funbury is, but maybe she had too many. Right. All right. Yeah, I don't need to do that. So I'm just gonna move on. Yeah. So there's a lot in the. And listen, I was thinking about this.
I also
About.
laughed trying to use the crystal on the phone.
Oh yeah. Like. So, what temperament have you gone for Brian? Artisan? No, not artisan. Idealist, rational. One of those.
I still don't know the answer to that. There's just not enough. He just hasn't had enough scenes, and make such a. You can make guesses, obviously, but
so maybe it's like 90% chance intuitive, 10% chance is ISFP, and that's it. Sort of the broad options. Yeah, but it's not that much of a developed character. I think the actor does okay in the part that he has.
Yeah, I mean, all the actors are convincing in their particular parts. They all seem like whoever they're supposed to be. So I don't. There's nobody, at least that I've encountered so far, that sticks out as, their acting performance detracting from the story in any way. So.
Right. I mean, sometimes it happens with Simon Nash for me, and then there's other times where like his comedy is pretty darn good. And I like this shot at the end where I don't even know what that's called. Where they did it in the last shot of Blake 7, where it went and it crops closer and closer on the same axis like that, and I think that can be an effective series of shots. I just don't know what the name of it is. I thought it was on axis cut, but I looked it up and that doesn't really appear. Oh, I thought you were going to say something, Jeff.
I was.
Right. Okay.
But I mean, you've gone on like two subjects later, so.
Sorry.
I was going to say the only, because I was talking about the acting not detracting from anything.
Okay.
Those characters in Zetas or whatever are the only ones, I guess, because most of the time they're very brief. So, but they don't really seem like. I'm not going to say they're bad acting. It's just they don't seem to put much into their performances. They're all just kind of these flat deliveries of whatever their dialogue is. So it's fill whatever the next. Somebody has to say this line, so this kid says it, and they just don't deliver with any kind of character whatsoever.
Yeah, because they've not really got an iceberg. They've not got that character iceberg.
It's just generic teenager character is what they all are. So
yeah, they get a little bit extra for me because like I recognize the various accents that they have. Like one of them's got a Liverpudlian accent, and I think one of those grannies was a Geordie accent because it's a little bit complicated in that area because you can't really say Newcastle because you've got like Sunderland and Newcastle and next to each other and like three bunched up together, so I can't necessarily say again. So you've got like Tyne and Wear, the River Tyne and River Wear.
Usually, you're the one that points out like differences between British and American shows and certain things. But I'll have to say one thing I would point out is, especially at this particular era, like early '90s American sitcom type things, when they had like old granny characters, they always had a certain, I don't know, over the topness to them that this doesn't have. Like the characters in this were much more subdued or subtle, which was good, I think. You don't always have to have that. And like you said, they were trying to give Lucy the attention, so it wouldn't have been good if you had the other grandma characters like taking away from it too much.
Yeah, sort of rejuvenated.
Yeah, but it seemed like American sitcom writers like couldn't resist doing that. It was always like we're going to have these sassy grandma characters that always would like talk to each other and stuff. So it was like that was just a trope that they couldn't get away from, or somebody at the networks was just fascinated with. So they always had to include it anytime there was anything about old lady characters.
Well, that's the big difference between American and British TV, I would say, in terms of production is the way sitcoms are written, in that you've got a team of writers. Now, it was a little bit different on Seinfeld because it would be like they would hand it over to a couple of writers rather than like having loads of them all pitch in. And
yeah, and then Jerry would end up rewriting it anyway.
Sorry, who would?
Jerry or ad-libbing things, because he also did that.
Yeah.
Sometimes when he couldn't physically actually say the lines without laughing, so he had to change it to something else that he could say.
Yep. So I wrote something. I've gone through this before. I just was just going through the. So, like I said, they did plant this with the scene. That scene with Kappatoo and his mother, and Simon cracking onto her.
Yeah, but like I said earlier, that sort of had the effect on me of making me think, where was she where all this was going on?
Yeah.
But I don't remember if there was someone when she showed up for that bit. If there was, all I remember is her saying she was going to watch Kappatoo on the whatever the thing was called again, the Ultra Match, yeah. But she didn't mention anything about like then she was going on vacation or anything. So.
And then we got, I did the on-axis cut. And I like the line, not future, not history, future. Yeah, and I was wondering at that point where you've got Simon as Kappatoo in the future, but the way he said that line, not history, future, he said it in Kappatoo's voice. But then again, that could be just Simon adapting to circumstances and deliberately deciding to say it the way Kappatoo.
Yeah, there was another moment when he said the thing about something about the rejuve or something, like he gave it sort of a abbreviation that it was like, would Simon really be familiar with it enough to say that about it?
Right.
But I guess you could say you can chalk it up to Simon's getting better at pretending to be Kappatoo.
Yeah, I mean, and he has had all of those lessons, like where he could just download it into his brain with sort of the history. Oh yes, there was a little bit early on. I think the biggest laugh was a double take early on from this guy. There's a bit where there's a double take. It was is it towards the end? Oh, it's.
You mean the bartender guy?
Yeah. He said something, and it was just a nice bit of physical comedy. He did a double take, Simon Nash, when he says to him, "Your grandmother And it was when he called her abroad, and he sort of went like this. When he called Lucy abroad.
Most of what he said, I couldn't even understand what he was saying, but I did hear him say that. Said something like she's quite abroad.
Yeah. Yeah. Right then. Yeah, I thought. Did you think the bowling alley stuff was okay, or a bit of padding, or
Yeah.
Okay?
I thought it was funny, he just gave her the advice and then he just can't do anything close to it himself.
Yeah.
I don't know. The thing with him like intentionally messing up Steve though, that I don't know if that seems as consistent with but I think I mentioned once before, like the character seemed like he started off a little bit nicer and then they made him a little bit more mischievous. I don't know if they were making it like he was starting to be more like Simon or what the deal was, but it didn't. I don't know. Things like that seem a little bit more out of place because he seems like he's more practical in general. Like he's thinking more about like what do I absolutely have to do rather than just goofing around. So
Yeah, but in that sort of situation though, like both of them got their hormones going, and they both
yeah, I guess.
fancy Melanie. So, I mean, remember you told that story about you once, like you regretted doing something when you were messing with somebody because it amused the girl, and then you did it again.
Oh yeah, that was the time I kept hitting my friend with the jacket because his sisters thought it was funny.
Yeah. So the situation can lead to like being carried away.
I'm not saying that. I just said that with his particular character, moments like that, seem a little bit out of place for the character to me. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, he seems overall not necessarily ENTP, but ENTP-ish. But then, say in that first series, he'll have these moments when, like, maybe like you've got the writer putting those ecological things in, and then when he told that story to Tracy Cotton about the house burning down, and like the ecological story about burning resources, but overall, I see his attitude as like I see him as ENTP-ish, but that's sort of like stereotypical, as you said, because it's a very futuristic society. But he's very much someone who's about his brains rather than his brawn. And then I see Simon more as an expressive artisan.
I guess the thing to me is that if he is NT, then it seems like he'd be able to like follow logic better in terms of it'd be like, okay, this is if I was trying to impress the girl, here's what actually did that. And is me making Steve screw up on his bowling or a weird thing happen to him when he's bowling going to help me with that? And probably not. So then it just comes off as petty.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It might have just been that in the moment that he was embarrassed by Steve.
Right. I'm not saying it can't happen. I mean, he's a teenager or whatever. I'm just saying it just that was just how it made me feel at the time seeing that. I was like, it just didn't seem like it fit. That just was my impression.
Yeah. I mean, but sometimes these things come up when, like, the writer goes for a cheap gag.
The plot, though, was very all over the place. It was just kind of haphazard. So it just that I keep on sort of having the feeling that the first season had a little bit tighter storyline in terms of it was simpler, and that was effective because it was like there was always something happening. but you weren't having to keep track of as many things at the same time.
It's
a little bit too convoluted because it's like they're trying to plant all these seeds in different directions, and it's like, look, you only have 7 episodes.
This is sort of what I was sort of saying last week, that in science fiction, especially when it's a science fiction show with a lot of concepts, if you're doing a serial, then there's a lot of ideas for people to remember over a lot of episodes, and it all builds up, rather than doing, say, self-contained episodes in the future where you introduce the ideas, and it's like the idea for that episode, and then the next episode is another idea. Whereas with this, it's the audience has to remember all of these ideas from previous episodes and plot threads associated with them. But what I would say,
and that in itself is not a problem, but it's just there's such a thing as just too many of them.
Yeah. And so in terms of continuity elements introduced, they did do that thing with the upgrade to the computer, where they're sort of like trying to corrupt him. And they did the thing with and I liked all the stuff with Lucy being in the future, and you said you liked that as well. So that was my favorite bit for me. They paid off the rejuvenation stuff. In terms of arc plot, the only thing that moved it on was that stuff with the computer and the upgrade to him that wasn't an upgrade. But sometimes we get these things, don't we, where we get a little bit of padding put in, especially when you have, when you have a storyline where it's heavily serialized, but you've not quite got enough story to spread it across your episodes, and it's difficult to put the padding in because of the way everything's formatted. Whereas if you've got a different kind of show where you've got more sort of threads, like I said before, when I said, like, if you've got a larger cast, you can sort of then concentrate on another character and have a good story for them, rather than trying to pad out a long continuity, a long sort of arc plot thing. We had that a little bit in the first season.
Really, the only thing that felt like padding to me was just having so many scenes where it was like, "Where's Lucy?" It's you didn't need you got. I was like, we get the point without having as many of those things where they're like, "Oh, now he's got to come up with another excuse for where Lucy is."
What I would have done is I would have reduced the amount of coverage of them in the present and done more on Lucy in the future, because I think
at least a little bit. They didn't need to keep reinforcing that.
Yeah, because they could have had more, not just funny scenes. It's just an interesting situation. Lucy being in the future and her banter with her brother and the computer. A little bit more of that would have been.
Well, I could skip the computer parts, but
yeah. So, I think overall, especially because of the way it ended, like the way the last one ended, it had a good build-up into this episode. And so I'll ask you, Jeff, because I remember you said about the last episode that you wanted to it made you want to see the next one. How well did this episode succeed at following up on last week's?
Well, I mean, it did directly in terms of addressing what happened to Lucy. I thought you were going to ask me whether this one made me want to see the next one. And I'm like, as far as if you just look at the ending part, not really.
That's sort of what I'm getting at. Like the ending, I thought was really pretty darn good for last week, in like having that sort of like.
Yeah, and again, I'll probably never know unless I somehow come across that missing part. Whether I would have felt the same way if we'd seen those scenes, but because it it jumped ahead, it was sort of like very abrupt. So that was part of it, as it seemed like a much more dramatic thing.
Right. I think they could have given Sarah Alexander's character Melanie a little bit more. Sort of doing in terms of characterization.
Yeah, we talked before about the problem of a generic female character.
Yeah.
And it seems like they set her up in the first episode she was in to be a little bit more kind of assertive, and then they sort of like, well, in this episode it fits better for her to be shyer or not really assert herself, so now she's not going to.
Yeah, this is one of the things with these science fiction things, because I just get the opinion that a lot of these writers, where it's like you think, oh, there's a lot of ideas, a lot of NTP stuff going on, they're usually not good at characterization, and it's like, it's like all these NTP writers don't know how to write women. These NTP male writers.
Unless it's a villainous character.
Yeah, but I actually thought I quite like Rudalenska's performance.
That's why I said unless, like, they can write that kind of character better.
Yeah.
Than they can more normal human females.
Yeah. And I suppose, given how she speaks in that sort of like, let's call it British theatre standard, I assume that you're able to understand almost every single word that Rudalenska said, because she was very clearly spoken. Zeta.
Who's that again?
Zeta 8.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Was she very clear, understandable to you, Jeff?
Yeah, for the most part. I can't remember not understanding her, unlike some other characters.
Yeah, because she's got like that kind of like the kind of talking style that they would have used a lot in the old Doctor Who's. Yeah, I call it coming from the planet Rada, where they have that sort of Shakespearean accent, the British equivalent of American theatre standard, I suppose.
Yeah, I just call it enunciating.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you like listen to, like, say, if you watch the Ten Commandments in 1956, and it's like it really has to be done in that accent, or because it's not going to be right. And it's very that kind of American theatrical accent is quite similar. It's not a million miles away from, like, say, the accent that they would do in the old Doctor Who's, like the Rada. To me,
I mean, it just seems like the character, it fits the character to speak that way, because she's sort of this, dramatic, over the top character, but the performance is not over the top in the sense that it's detracting. It's just the character is, a melodramatic type villain character. So
so you get this thing of like, there's a thing in characterization where you've got the role of the character and the role of the character in the story, and then you don't necessarily want to over-characterize the character, even though I would be interested in that, because it depends what kind of program you've got, where it's like if something's very plot-heavy and science fiction-y, it's more about the plot than the characters. So we never got round to, anyway. I remember you saying that you censored yourself with that smile. Yes, right. I give this one 8 out of 10. One less than last week because of the ending wasn't as good.
It's tough for me because, on the one hand, it was a more fun episode, but then it was also convoluted more. So it's like, well, where do I find the average between those two? So it's I'll say 7.
Right. Okay. Which is actually high for you. I mean, that's like one of the best Blake 7s. 7.
Yeah. Well, like I said, if I enjoy something, then 7 is sort of like this was good and enjoyable score, and it just means there wasn't. Usually, it means there wasn't something to make me go, "Oh, this was extra good," In this, there were some things that I thought were extra good, but there were also some things that took away from it. So that's why it's back to a 7. So
now we're going to get a little bit of an extra now, folks. What were the things that were extra good then, Jeff?
Well, I mean, I've already mentioned it. Just the plot line with Lucy doing the grandma bit, like all that was fun, you know.
Yeah, that was good.
So going into like from the end of last episode, obviously you didn't know what was going to end up happening, you know, and when they have her basically sort of faint at the beginning, that was the other thing I didn't mention is she has this like faint that she recovers from in 5 seconds. So I don't know if they gave her some sort of, you know, futuristic thing where you wave something over and she's instantly back, but they didn't seem to show that. But anyway,
I mean,
but when that happened, it could have been like, oh, she's not really going to do much. And then obviously it turned out that it was pivotal in the episode. So. I mean, that was the part that was the most fun.
I mean, if I had this actor who looks like he's got a curved spine, I wouldn't have shot him like this. Like from that angle. I might changed it a little bit so that, because, yeah, he's got a bit of a curved spine, it looks like.
Well, they've already established that this particular version of the future, the outfits are not very good for the most part.
Yeah. Right then, so
people aren't in good physical shape.
Yes. Yep. Oops. Yeah, that was just me going from changing the size of the screen and it threw me out of it. So yeah, to recap, I give it 8, Jeff gives it 7, and the next episode is going to be another one with time in it. And
what a surprise.
And it's going to be called Wrong Time, Wrong Place.
All right.
Right then, so I'm going to end the
See
book.
you next week.
I don't know what we know what Heidi Hay is, but we don't know what the goodbye is in that series.
Doodly doo.
Toodle pit.